I remember the Robin Williams quote where it's like, in the minute you climax, you feel like a god, and you look like goddamn Goofy.
No,
Yes,
you're not
yes.
wrong.
Whoa! This is so much fun. Welcome to the Indie Author Showcase, the podcast by indie authors for indie authors. I'm your host, Chad Robert Morgan, and I'm glad to have with us for the second time, Cynthia Diamond.
Hello. 2 times the charm. Hopefully we don't have to do 3 times the charm.
Yeah, God, I hope not. So I mentioned it on this week's podcast, or last week's podcast, by the time you're watching this. But we were trying to set up our first ever live stream, and it did not work.
We tried. I mean, it was A for effort. So I still had a good time talking. So, I mean, it was still fun.
So just remember all those answers so we can repeat them again today.
Oh, man. I feel like WonderCon was like a lifetime ago already. It's just been a heck of a couple of weeks. So,
Oh, Lord. It was so dead this year. I checked my receipts.
yeah,
It was like half of what it was the year before.
I did pretty good. It was not bad at all. So I will take it. I definitely made my booth fee back and my meal money back. So I'll take it.
So tell our viewers where they can find you. Where are you at?
Yes, I write paranormal and monster romance. I am currently working on my first fantasy romance. And you can find me just about everywhere. I'm wide release. So you can find me on Amazon. You can find me on Nook. You can find me on iBooks. You can find all of my books on audio. So you can find me on Audible and Libro FM. You can also find me on my website, which is CynthiaDiamondAuthor.com. I sell all of my books, paperbacks. I just don't sell audiobooks there. But if you don't want to go through one of the big stores, you can go directly to me too.
And is that Goliath and Hudson I see in the background?
It is, yes.
Nice.
I was a part of the Gargoyles fandom back in the 90s. We actually did conventions, and I was one of the staffers on the conventions. And so I have a big Gargoyles was a big influence in my life for my youth in my 20s, and I still have quite an obsession with it. So yeah, that was Goliath was a Christmas present from my husband, and you should have saw my face when I got him. So
Later, I'll have to show you my office. I have almost the entire collection. I'm missing a few, but they're all
yeah,
still in the box, hung up on the wall.
yeah, I had to take mine out, but I kind of cherry pick. The next one I want to get is Lexington, because Lexington was always my favorite.
So you're doing paranormal romance,
Mhm.
and the one thing I ask of anybody who's doing any kind of spicy stuff is, it seems statistically that the younger generation is less and less into that, which boggles my mind because when I was a kid, I couldn't get enough of that. But there you go. So I know, like when we reviewed your book on the podcast, um, back then I was still doing it with my son. And it's like we were doing fine until we started getting to the end. He's like, "Yeah, I just skipped that part. I just skipped that part." Um, do you find that your clientele skews towards the older demographics, or are you finding enough younger readers to kind of uh, to get new readers
Well,
on board?
I've honestly, my demographic has always been pretty much from like 25 on. That's who I noticed. So I never really had a younger demographic. I tend to market towards the more late 20s, early 30s, and 40s. And a lot of that comes from the fact that a lot of my heroes and heroines, a lot of my main characters are in my age range. They tend to skew more in the 30s, 40s, 50s, because that is what I know. So you tend to like gravitate more towards what you can relate to. I'm finding that's just from I mean, I have no statistics to back that up, but that is, for me, I tend to gravitate more towards that. So I tend to write towards more that. So I haven't really noticed much of a difference just because it's always been that demographic for me. And I tend to write more for older men and women. And But I do admit that I know that they said that not a lot of the young demographics, I don't know if it's different because I've only written in romance, but I do find a lot of the young 20-year-olds tend to flock more towards romance, at least that in my genre is what I've seen. I don't write young adult, so I can't really say that, oh, my, teen readers, I tend to not market that because I feel almost guilty in a way that I'm like marketing more steamy stuff to people who are underage. Not that I'll stop them if they decide to pick up my book, but I haven't noticed a difference. I've always noticed it's just been a steady stream of 25 up for me.
Recently, you started doing this full time. Like this is your career now, right?
At this moment, yes.
So, how is that going? What has being a full-time writer, how has that motivated you to maybe like change up your marketing or, get more aggressive with it or try new things? And what's worked?
For now, I've only been doing full-time writing for a few months. I was unfortunately let go from my job in November. And after I kind of got over the initial shock of that, I decided to dive full headfirst into writing. I'm still looking for a day job at this point, but the job market is brutal right now. So I haven't had much luck. So this has literally just been what I've been doing. One thing I did notice is when I'm able to concentrate on it, my creativity skyrockets. In the past, when I have been working full time and I've been writing on the side, I can usually maybe get one book out a year if I'm lucky. The last couple of years, it's been harder because I did have a very taxing day job. So I was kind of going every other year for a while. Now I've just finished my fantasy romance and I'm literally diving right into the next one. I am ready to go. So that having that freedom to free that part of my brain up to do that has been insanely liberating and wonderful. And I love that. I do find that I've been hitting the marketing and everything a lot harder than I have in the past, simply because I have the time to, and I have the actual brain capacity, I have the bandwidth to do this. So I have been hitting my social medias a lot harder than I have in the past. And I actually have been having time to do like little TikTok videos and looking into marketing and looking into that. And I finding that it's still an uphill battle. The algorithm is still a big jungle that you can so easily get lost in. And I'm still trying to find my way, but I am starting to find that things are clicking here and there and people are starting to like recognize my name. And I noticed that especially at WonderCon, where I had a few people actually come up to me saying, hey, I think I saw you on TikTok. Never had that before in my life. Or I think I saw you on Instagram. And I'm like, oh my God, it's working. So I am noticing a little bit of an uptick. It's still a marathon, not a sprint. So I'm still kind of like working towards getting that visibility, but I am getting there. And I do have to admit that just kind of like doing fun things on social media at least once a day has gotten me a little more views. It's gotten me, my name is starting to kind of slowly circulate out there. So that's been great. The only thing that's the bummer part about it is while I am making sales, they're not like, it's not like, oh my God, it's a landslide of money and it's amazing. I still really need to work very hard on getting my name out there. But the good part is I have time to do that now.
I have noticed that you've really upped your TikTok game there.
Oh yeah, I kind of abandoned TikTok for a few years, and then all of a sudden it's like I'm back. So,
I'm taking notes because marketing is not anything I have yet to master.
Honestly, for me, it's like I throw it at the wall and see what sticks. I literally have been doing that, where I just do a bunch of different videos. I get inspired by other authors and what they're doing. And then I just go, okay, you know what? That would be kind of fun. And you never really know what is going to like hit hard and what is people are going to be really like, oh, I really loved that. And I just suddenly like someone really like my views tick on something and it'll be something usually it's something very throwaway, like something I put a lot of thought and graphics into and all this. It goes nowhere, but it's like me like literally lip syncing to some stupid line in a stupid hat and everyone's like, oh, I love that. Like. So it is kind of a crapshoot.
What were your influences growing up? What did you read that made you want to go into paranormal romance and creature romance?
Well, the funny part is that I didn't get into romance till I was an adult. I, as a child, was a huge fan of fantasy and sci-fi, definitely fantasy and definitely urban fantasy. I loved I just would just pick up anything and devour it. I also was a theater kid, so I read scripts a lot. I used to just devour like Neil Simon and Shakespeare and all of that. So I didn't really get into romance till I was in my 20s when I picked up a romance novel kind of on a dare. I hate to say that in my youth, I was like not one of those girls who was like, ooh, romance is for girls. And I'm not one of those girls. We all went through a phase like that. I'm not going to lie. Almost every woman has gone through that. And I kind of shunned romance for a really long time, thinking that it was trashy and all of that. I mean, I did. I will always admit that. And then during a period in my life when I was going through a lot and going through a lot of relationship issues, I picked up a book that I just literally ordered on the sly from Amazon way back in the day when Amazon was just books. And I read it, and there was something about it that really touched me. And it wasn't an open door romance. It wasn't a romance that was steamy. It was just a romance about two people falling in love. It was a period romance. It was so medieval. I still love this book with all my heart. And it there was something about it that really just kind of opened a door in my heart and made me go, you know what? I, as a human being who has been in this really awful relationship and was mistreated for quite a few years, deserve that. And that's how I ended up just falling right into the genre. Then I read another one, and then I read another one, and then my little nerdy heart suddenly discovered, oh my gosh, there's like stuff that's paranormal and magical, and it's like fantasy based. This is amazing. And I just fell in, and then I found friends who loved romance too, and then we started exchanging titles and authors, and it was great. And that's what I ended up. That's how I fell into it, was when I was an adult. What influenced me as a child was like, of all things, Disney. I wanted to be an animator when I was a kid. I wanted to go into animation. I loved fairy tales. As we were just chatting at the beginning of when we started this, I was really into gargoyles. And I really think gargoyles is what got me into monster romance, because have you looked at Goliath? So,
Oh,
and
he was smacking down with Elisa. Let's be honest there.
oh yeah, I mean, I was rooting for that. Like that was why I was glued to my television every Disney afternoon, was for that relationship. And that was a big influence on me. And that's how I ended up falling into it. And like I said, I didn't start out as a writer. I didn't go to school for a writer. I went to school for theater. I was a costume designer. I was a musical theater person. That's what I did. And then when I suddenly realized I don't want to design anymore because it's literally sucking the life out of me, and I based my entire identity around being a costume designer, I felt really lost. And then that's when I started writing romance, and I started writing it just for the heck of it. And then all of a sudden I just decided to go into publishing. That's a whole different story than what the question you asked me. But it really was something that came much later in life than as in childhood. Childhood, I was pretty much into fairy tales and fantasy and a little bit of sci-fi, but it was definitely fantasy.
You mentioned something about a closed door romance. For those uninitiated, what is the closed door romance versus an open door romance?
So there are different terms for closed door and open door. I call it closed door. Some people call it sweet romance. Some people call it clean romance. It's essentially romance that don't go into detail in the sexy bits. So it's considered like they kiss, they embrace, and they close the door to the bedroom is really what that's implying. So it will like fade to black. That's another way that sometimes people explain a fade to black romance. And one thing I love about the romance genre is it's so versatile, where you can write a romance, but you don't have to write the sex. And the romance is really what romance is about. is just the romance, this couple meeting and connecting and their trials and tribulations together and how they make it work. But it doesn't, not all romance has sex in it.
When it comes to doing the spicy bits, and I know your book's got spicy bits. Actually, before we get into that, you have two series right now, right? You have the Weird Love, and then what was the second one?
And the second one is my monster trilogy. It's called Magical Husbandry. And that's the one that I go more into the monster romance. Now, monster romance is kind of like a little niche subgenre in the paranormal romance genre. And it can get pretty bonkers. Mine is not quite bonkers. My two heroes in that one, I only have the first two books out right now. They're satyrs. So they have a lot of human quality. They just happen to have hooves and a tail and horns. So I like to consider myself like a gateway to monster romance, because sometimes it can get really bonkers. I love the bonkers stuff, but sometimes it freaks people out. So I always say, if you're going to start, I'm kind of a good jumping point into the more bonkers stuff. But that is my second series, is Magical Husbandry. Weird Love is a little more paranormal. It's a little more, I hesitate to use the word human because they really aren't human, but they are human presenting. So
getting to the open door spicy bits, right? Which I'm guessing is some of the funner parts to write.
Depends.
For me, and I'm just talking about me personally, when I do like spicy bits, it's almost for comic relief. Because I think spicy bits, when two people are doing spicy, it's the most ridiculous things a human being can do.
Not wrong.
I remember the Robin Williams quote where it's like, in the minute you climax, you feel like a god, and you look like goddamn Goofy. Yes,
no, you're not wrong.
Whoa! This is so much fun. So how do you? And again, this is kind of where my mindset is. So, how do you get into the other mindset where like, this is serious, this is passionate, this is going to be, Well,
here's the funny thing is that a lot, for me, this is different for every author, but for me, it's not like I sit down and go, I'm going to write a sex scene, and it's like some big euphoric moment or anything like that. I actually end up rewriting those scenes the most out of everything, that and fight scenes, because there's a lot in common. And I tend to I will go, when I write them, I actually go, okay, there's going to be a sex scene. Half the time when I'm writing, I will literally put in parentheses in bright red letters, sex scene goes here. And then I skip to the next part because I want to keep going with the momentum of the story and the relationship. So I just keep going. And then I go back when I get that part done. And then I go, okay, I'm going to go back. And then I go through it again and go, all right, they're going to kiss and they're going to do this and they're going to do this. And then I go back to writing the rest. And then I go back again and I fill in the details, because for me, I feel that a sex scene in a book should be there to somehow move either the story or the characters along. That's me. That is just my opinion. A lot of people like when they don't, and I'm totally down with that. And I've read some great books that the sex scenes are there and they were like, oh, that was a really cool moment, but it wasn't quite shattering to the story or anything. But that's just how I write. And when I write a sex scene, I have to know exactly what the characters are feeling. I need to know exactly what the characters are going to react, how this is a momentum moment for this couple to finally be letting their walls down and be vulnerable with each other. That's how I look at a sex scene, more so than how to be titillating. It's more about how are these characters going to bond. That's how I write my sex scenes. So I end up writing them a few times, because I'll do my first pass over and I usually skip over it. And then I do my next pass over. I go through the bare bones basics, but it's not until I really have a good idea of who these characters are in my head before I can really write that connection. And then I go and I write that connection. And it's not a sexy process in any way, shape, or form. I remember being at a book club and they were asking me, well, how do you write these? And I said, literally, when I'm first writing them, it's like getting two Barbie dolls and slapping them together like this a couple of times. And they go, okay, we're done. Let's move on. And that's literally how it feels sometimes. Just trying to figure it out. And so it's not until like the very final pass through of the steamy scenes where I finally go, okay, now I can get into their heads, because it's less about the actions and more about the feelings when I write a sex scene. And I'm not saying that I don't, get hot and heavy with these characters, but I do. The emotional part is the connection is really where I like to concentrate on. So it is a very technical thing to do for me, as opposed to just being like, I'm in the moment. The parts I get like totally like connected is when I'm writing banter and dialogue. And that's when I'm in the flow. And that's when I'm like, because I have such a background with reading scripts and comedies. And that's when I'm like, I could just do this in my sleep. This is great. And I'm really in the moment. And then as soon as they have to like bump uglies, I'm like, okay, now we got to stop. And I got to think of logistics. I got to think about, is that physically possible? I got to think about what they're going through their mind. Is this a scene where it has to be kind of like hot and heavy? Or is this a scene where it's got to be tender? Is this a scene, there's so much to think about that you just can't do it in one pass through.
The closest I've had to a monster romance moment was actually in the prologue of The Baby Eater. Because I had a guy
That's appropriate for some reason, the title.
It was much less romantic and much more the guy was devoured at the end. So not quite the sweet romantic stuff that you're doing.
I mean, you do write horror and I write romance. So there is, even though there is horror romance, very different things.
Well, I also write raunchy sci-fi comedy.
Yeah.
But
that's also kind of, that's a little more close to what I write. Not all sex scenes are going to be diaphanous gowns and caressings of the bosom. I don't use a lot of euphemisms when I write sex scenes. But I also don't use like medical terms, because can I use words on this podcast? Because I was going to say, I can't just say vagina and try to make the word vagina sound sexy. I'm sure some people
does sound a little weird.
I cannot. I also think the word penis is also very silly. And so I use like other words, not euphemism words like, diaphanous folds and his mighty, steel rod. I don't do that. There's like a middle ground there that a lot of romance writers use. And I do use more abrasive language when I'm writing my sex scenes. But sometimes I've read some great romances with some of the funniest, raunchiest sex scenes you could possibly imagine. And it's still romance and it's wonderful. A lot of people tend to kind of like pinpoint or try to like box in romance to what the typical bodice rippers were back in the 80s and the 90s in some ways too. But it's so diverse of a genre, which is why I love it so much, that you can read a raunchy, hilarious sex scene, and you can also get your diaphanous folds in another book if that's not your thing. and both are valid and both are great.
So you should try that. Paranormal romance comedy.
Most of my stuff is romance comedy, actually, and paranormal. There are some good authors that are paranormal romance comedy that I absolutely adore. And sci-fi romance comedy, actually, and those are great. So,
well, which authors have you read? Which ones do you like?
Let's see. Naomi Lucas, she's a little more serious. Tiffany Roberts does some really great. It's a husband and wife team that write. Tiffany Roberts is kind of my go-to. When I say monster and paranormal, because they're more famous for doing sci-fi monster, but some of their stuff is hilarious. And it's also got a lot of like heart and edge and stakes as well. I can't say enough good things. Nancy Cummings does really wonderful sci-fi romance, and it's a little less like, and the war of the, colonies and stuff. And it's more of a almost like slice of life. These two characters, an alien and a human, have to kind of like be together and they have to be married, and how the heck are they going to just survive being on this space station without being so different from each other? And those can get really funny too, and also pretty steamy too. They're pretty wonderful. Those are two of the ones off the top of my head that I can think of right now. And yeah, and like I said, they're out there and they're great. Oh, and before I forget, CM Nacosta, who actually, I'm gonna say, wrote one of, like, now it's called, like, it's like the titular monster romance called Morning Glory Milking Farm, which I know is a meme now because it went viral. And I read it just because I'm like, what the heck? It is the most delightful romantic comedy. And it's a monster. And this is the premise. And I'm kidding you not. And you may have to censor this. The book girlies know this. It is literally about a woman who works at a factory where minotaurs go in to get masturbated because their semen is, like, for medical purposes. It is, but it's written like a small town rom-com. And I know that it sounds bonkers, but it is friggin' delightful and hilarious and sweet. And I went into it thinking it was just going to be some weird ass erotica, and it wasn't. And I'm like, how does she do it? I am so impressed. And another one is Kimberly Lemmings. She writes the Meat and Mishap series, and it is literally like reading a D&D campaign, a steamy D&D campaign. You want to talk about some wonderful fantasy romantic comedy. Kimberly Lemming is where it's at. I love this series she wrote. It is one of the funniest things I've ever read. If you are a RPG player like I am, if you've done tabletop and that sort of thing, she will be up your alley, because you can tell this woman has played tabletop. She's got a wicked sense of humor. Her sex scenes are actually pretty steamy, and they're hilarious too in some parts, because especially the women are so real, and they feel so real in that moment. And it's not like the birds are singing and the sunlight is streaming, and it's like these ridiculous moments where it's like, well, my pants are off, so I guess we'll do this, type of thing. And it's wonderful, and I cannot say enough good things about Kimberly Lemming. She's amazing.
Not spicy, but definitely you're talking about role-playing comedy. If you've ever get a chance, watch Gamers Darkness Rising.
Oh, I have. A long time ago. Yeah. Those are my people right there.
They're actually finally coming out with a proper sequel to that.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
I have to rewatch it. It's been ages since I've seen it. But yeah, we ended up with like a bootleg copy on DVD way back in the day or something. And my husband and I watched it with our gamer group, and we were on the floor. It was so funny.
Get behind the pile of dead bards.
Because those are how I play. This is the time. I've never played a serious tabletop game. It's always been just pure comedy. It's always turned into Monty Python at some point. And it's insane. So I was like, I can relate to this so hard.
Do you still play a lot of D&D?
I don't do right now. We're not doing D&D. We're doing Fallout. So we're doing a Fallout tabletop. My GM likes to kind of like dabble. We did a Pathfinder game for a little while. We did a really short campaign, but we've been doing more. We've been kind of branching out. So we've done. We're right in the middle of Fallout, which is a very fun tabletop game, and I love the series too. And my husband loves the video game. So, and I don't play video games. I just do tabletop, but Fallout is a good system. We just finished a campaign of this game called Outgunned, which is so wonderful. And it was one of the funniest games I was ever a part of. And it's pretty much all based around the movie genres. So you can do all these different modules, like from James Bond to Mission Impossible to Indiana Jones to Star Wars, type of thing. And you just plug in these modules because it's all supposed to be very cinematic and very like you're in a movie. So we did the Indiana Jones module, and cinematic is like up my alley. I love the movies. So I was like, we were all in character. It was literally like we were the B team from The Mummy is essentially what we were. And it was so funny. And already he's like, I ran out of modules. I think I'm just going to write one. And so we're going to go back to it because we decided to make this campaign a trilogy because we already did one. Then we decided to go back with all these characters. And now I think we're going to have a third and final trilogy because every good franchise is a trilogy. So
See, that right there is the premise for a whole new show. Indie authors that role play.
Right I know, there. Right?
It's like indie author gamers are right there.
The character Cyberpunk's one of my favorite. One of my favorite characters I ever played was from Cyberpunk. And anytime my husband's like, "We're running a Cyberpunk game," I'm like, "I have to play her. I will not play anyone else. I'm going to be my completely unhinged rocker girl. It's going to happen."
The last D&D campaign I played, I was a half-orc rogue.
Oh, nice.
I figured I was either going to do that or be a gnomish barbarian.
I was a undead gnome necromancer one time named Alana. So I was Alana gnome. So bad. And I was also a halfling berserker one time too. That was fun.
So as my dog is making noise, picking the absolute wrong time to eat dinner. Yes, I know you're hungry. I know it's dinner time. He's waiting for his wet food.
Well, my cats are locked out because they would be in here yelling at me.
So where can people find you next? What's your next event?
The next event I'm doing is called Raven Spicy Reads. It's in Chula Vista, California at the Gaylord, and it's June 26th and 27th, I believe. It is a romance convention. I am so excited. I've never done it before. It's got a good reputation for being a really good con. And I'm just excited that I can just kind of drive down the street to it because it's in San Diego proper. And I'm like, yes, no hotel room. But I'm excited to do that. A lot of my author friends and romance author friends will be participating too, like Tessa McFeon and Angel Payne, and a lot of like wonderful writers that are local are going to be featured there, and it's worth it because we have an amazing romance writing community in San Diego, and they are definitely worth checking out. And they run the gamut from like contemporary to paranormal to fantasy to rom-com to suspense, like you name it, we probably have it here in San Diego.
Where can the people find your books? You mentioned they're pretty much wide release. They're pretty much anywhere.
Yes. I am really easy to find if you look up Cynthia Diamond. And the good part is my name is very easy to spell. And I am everywhere. I'm on Amazon. My next book, Bardic and the Beast, is currently on pre-order. It comes out on April 30th. I am so super proud of this one. It is a romantasy. Okay, so it's not really, it's more of a fantasy romance because romantasy has specific beats that you have to hit, and mine's not really that. But I'm kind of saying it's like half romantasy, half fantasy romance. And I'm very excited for this book to come out. And that is on pre-order right now on Amazon, on Nook, on iBooks, Apple Books. You can also pre-order a paperback from me on my website. You can get all my books on my website too, which is cynthiadiamondauthor.com. I'm very easy to find. I also have, with the exception of the book that hasn't come out yet, everything's on audio. I'm a big audiobook fan, and that's how I was able to read during some of my brutal commutes when I was working. And so I was very much, I need to save my money up and create audiobooks for people who are like me, who just don't have time to sit down, or the brain power or the eye power or anything. And I have an amazing narrator named Michael Fieriolo. And you can find all the books on Audible and pretty much almost anywhere audiobooks are. I'm pretty wide release there too.
You mentioned that your new book isn't, it's more fantasy romance and less.
It's a weird romantasy.
Romantasy.
Romantasy is a very strange, like, new term, and I'm still not quite sure how to use it. Romantasy is pretty much fantasy romance, but people are very, like, particular about their, what is a subgenre. Like, for example, I don't know if it matters anymore, but back when I first started writing paranormal romance, I had to classify it as a paranormal romance, not an urban fantasy romance. They were two very distinct things. And I was like, well, mine feels more like it's urban fantasy. And they're like, no, urban fantasy is it's an in the way they defined it at the time. It might have changed since then. Is it was a ongoing story. Usually, if it was a series, it's going to be the same characters. There aren't really any like weird mythical creatures like I have in it. It's very grounded in reality. It's more like Dresden Files type of thing. I still don't quite understand it, so I just went, all right, I write paranormal romance. I'll just say that, and I've stuck with that ever since. A lot of people, when you say romantasy, they think more of like Fourth Wing, which is like young heroine who is the chosen one and like gets hooked up with their shadow daddy, hero who might be some sort of like dark fae or something, and there might be dragons and she's the chosen one. That tends to be the formula. But the definition is always changing. And I'm not quite sure what to call this book. So I've been kind of sticking with fantasy romance just because Bardic and the Beast is very inspired by Dungeons and Dragons, both my games that I've played in, as well as the movie, the Den of Thieves movie, which I absolutely loved. And that's where it's like inspiration comes from. It's much more like, it feels like more of a D&D campaign than I am Elizabeth Wicker Basket and I am the chosen one and I'm only 19. So I tend to like write more older heroines. This heroine's in her 30s, and the other hero is in his 30s, and they tend to be a little more older. Everything skews a little more adult, as opposed to I am the naive chosen one. There's really no chosen one in this book. It's just two people trying to survive, orc and a person trying to survive everything that's being thrown at them at the time. So that's kind of why I'm like, I don't know if I should use romantasy, but once again, the definition's always changing. So I'm not quite, I'll figure it out. Right now, fantasy romance is the way I think it is best described.
Yeah, because I remember, I think we were talking about that with your Wild Love series. To me, that could also be urban fantasy because I mean that does take place in the modern day. You have all these.
I used to classify Weird Love as urban fantasy until it was something to do with how I had to like not market it, but classify it for a contest or something. And there was definitely a great debate of like, what is urban fantasy? What is paranormal romance? And what is urban fantasy romance? Now, I don't think it really matters because I think they both kind of blur the line now and it's not quite as defined. This was back in the early 2000s. So it's changed. But it's paranormal romance is kind of like the cover all right now for anything that is magical and set in like today's world, or magical but doesn't have a heavy fantasy theme to it. That's how it's usually classified. Usually there's a dragon. Well, and I have written a book with a dragon, so it does make sense. Throw a dragon at it. That became a running gag with me and my writer friends. If you can't figure it out, throw a dragon at it.
Okay, so real quick to summarize, you're going to be at the Spicy Reads convention in Chula Vista.
Yep. And that's June.
That's
June 26th and 27th, Raven Spicy Reads.
And then they can find you at CynthiaDiamondAuthor.com.
Correct.
All right. Well, Cynthia, it was great having you here. I'm sorry I had to make you do this again.
Sorry, I still had a good time. It's all good. Now I get to be in the comfy chair as opposed to those crappy, plastic chairs that we were in last time. So honestly, it was better. And I'm not shouting above all the noise. So I'll take it. This is actually much more comfortable.
I know, but I was trying to get it live so that way people could say, oh, look, she's actually there right now. I could go.
Yeah.
And that didn't work.
It was still appreciated. The intentions were still appreciated. So.
All right. Well, Cynthia, it's been a joy having you. And then
thanks for having me.
And then for everybody else, we'll see you next week on the Indie Author Showcase. And until then, keep on reading.